Welcome to Dreamland Sleep Stories. Tonight, take a deep breath, relax, and listen to our story. Subscribe to our channel and let you fall asleep with peaceful images and soothing sounds. As night falls, the noise of the city fades away. Dear friends with insomnia, please follow my words. Temporarily put down the worries of real life and enter a fantasy world full of magic and passion. In this world, a brave and fearless warrior will meet a mysterious queen, and their fates will be intertwined to write a thrilling, heroic epic. Let us wander together in this ups and downs adventure, feel the power of love and courage, and perhaps at the end of the story, you will find inner peace and sleep. Certainly. I'll begin with the first chapter of 1,500 words in English, written from a third-person storyteller's perspective without dialogue. I'll await your prompt to continue with subsequent chapters. In the twilight of a fading summer, when the air hung heavy with the scent of ripening wheat and the promise of change, a young warrior named Leon stood at the crossroads of his fate. The small village of Oakvale, nestled in the rolling hills of the kingdom's heartland, had been his home for all of his 25 years. Yet on this evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of amber and rose, Leon felt the stirring of something greater calling to him. The village square buzzed with the usual evening activity. Farmers returning from their fields, children playing their last games before supper, and the old ones sitting on weathered benches, sharing tales of days long past. But for Leon, the familiar sights and sounds seemed distant, as if viewed through a veil of mist. His mind wandered to the events of the past week, replaying the moment that had set him on this new path. It had been an ordinary day, much like any other, when the mysterious traveler arrived in Oakvale. Cloaked in robes of midnight blue and silver, the stranger's appearance caused quite a stir among the villagers. Leon had watched from the smithy, where he honed his craft as a swordsmith, as the traveler made his way directly to the village elder's home. Hours passed, and curious whispers circulated through Oakvale, speculating about the purpose of this unexpected visit. As dusk fell, Leon found himself summoned to the elder's home. There, in the flickering light of oil lamps, he learned of a quest that would change the course of his life. The traveler, revealed to be an emissary from the distant kingdom of Lunaria, spoke of a growing darkness threatening to engulf the realm. Ancient prophecies foretold of a warrior from humble beginnings who would rise to meet this challenge, and all signs pointed to Leon as the chosen one. At first, Leon had scoffed at the notion. He was no hero, merely a village swordsmith with dreams of adventure that he had long ago set aside in favor of duty to his family and community. Yet as the emissary recounted tales of the kingdom's plight and the dire consequences should evil prevail, Leon felt a fire ignite within his soul. It was as if every swing of his hammer, every blade he had forged, had been preparing him for this moment. And so, on this warm summer evening, Leon stood at the edge of Oakvale, his meager possessions packed and his finest sword strapped to his hip. The weight of his decision pressed upon him, a mix of excitement and trepidation coursing through his veins. He cast one last glance at the only home he had ever known, committing to memory the sights and sounds of Oakvale. The road ahead stretched long and winding, leading to the great city of Lunaria, where he was to present himself to the royal court. Leon knew little of the world beyond the rolling hills of his homeland, but the maps provided by the emissary promised a journey filled with wonders and perils alike. Forests as old as time itself, mountains that scraped the very heavens, and deserts of shimmering gold all lay between him and his destiny. As Leon took his first steps on the path that would lead him away from everything familiar, he felt a curious lightness in his heart. The unknown beckoned, promising adventure and purpose beyond anything he had dared to imagine. The sword at his side, forged by his own hands, seemed to hum with anticipation, as if it too sensed the great deeds that lay ahead. The journey to Lunaria would not be swift or easy. Leon knew he faced weeks of travel, each day bringing new challenges and tests of his resolve. But with each step, he felt his determination grow stronger. The fate of a kingdom, perhaps the entire world, rested upon his shoulders, and he vowed to meet that responsibility with every ounce of courage and skill he possessed. As night fell in earnest, Leon made camp beneath the boughs of an ancient oak tree. The stars above shone with a brilliance he had never before noticed, as if the very heavens were watching his journey with keen interest. Sleep did not come easily that first night, his mind racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. Would he truly be the hero the kingdom needed? Could a simple village swordsmith rise to such a monumental task? In the depths of the night, as Leon teetered on the edge of slumber, a vision came to him. He saw a figure shrouded in shadow, crowned with starlight, reaching out to him across a great distance. Though he could not make out the figure's features, he felt a pull towards it, a sense of destiny intertwined. The vision faded as quickly as it had come, leaving Leon with a sense of purpose renewed. With the first light of dawn, Leon rose, his resolve hardened by the night's vision. He broke camp swiftly, eager to cover as much ground as possible before the heat of the day set in. The road stretched endlessly before him, each bend and turn promising new sights and experiences. Days blended into weeks as Leon journeyed onward. He crossed babbling brooks and forded mighty rivers, scaled rolling hills and skirted the edges of dark, foreboding forests. Along the way, he encountered fellow travelers, merchants with their laden carts, pilgrims on sacred journeys, and even a troupe of wandering minstrels who regaled him with songs of heroic deeds. With each encounter, Leon's understanding of the world grew, as did his determination to succeed in his quest. As he drew nearer to Lunaria, the landscape began to change. The pastoral farmlands gave way to more cultivated grounds, and the roads became wider and better maintained. Signs of the kingdom's wealth and power became more evident: marble quarries, vast orchards, and the occasional glimpse of a noble's estate rising above manicured gardens. At last, after nearly a month of travel, Leon crested a final hill and beheld the gleaming spires of Lunaria in the distance. The city was a marvel of architecture and magic, its towers seeming to defy the very laws of nature as they reached towards the heavens. A sense of awe washed over Leon as he realized that his journey was nearing its end and that his true challenge was about to begin. With the sun setting behind him, casting long shadows across the land, Leon approached the gates of Lunaria. The massive iron-bound doors stood open, welcoming travelers from all corners of the realm. As he passed through the threshold, Leon felt a shiver run down his spine. He had answered the call of destiny, traversing great distances and facing countless challenges. Now, standing within the fabled city of Lunaria, he knew that his life would never be the same. The bustling streets of the capital engulfed Leon, a cacophony of sights, sounds, and smells overwhelming his senses. Merchants hawked exotic wares from far-off lands. Street performers entertained crowds with feats of magic and acrobatics, and the air was thick with the aroma of spices and incense. Amidst the chaos, Leon made his way towards the towering palace at the city's heart, where his fate and the fate of the kingdom awaited. As night fell over Lunaria, the city transformed. Lanterns flickered to life, casting a warm glow over the cobblestone streets. The sound of laughter and music drifted from taverns and inns, promising comfort and respite for weary travelers. But for Leon, there would be no rest this night. His path led straight to the palace, where the royal court awaited his arrival. With each step towards the palace gates, Leon felt the weight of his destiny growing heavier. The simple life he had known in Oakvale seemed a distant memory now, fading like mist in the morning sun. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever trials he must face, Leon knew that he had been called for a purpose. And as the palace loomed before him, its spires piercing the star-studded sky, he steeled himself for the great adventure that was about to unfold. As the first light of dawn painted the sky in hues of lavender and gold, Leon found himself standing before the imposing gates of the royal palace of Lunaria. The night had passed in a whirlwind of introductions and hushed conversations as the young warrior was ushered through gilded halls and opulent chambers. Now, with the new day breaking, he awaited his formal presentation to the court and to the mysterious queen who ruled this vast kingdom. The palace garden stretched out before him, a tapestry of vibrant colors and intoxicating scents. Fountains sparkled in the early morning light, their gentle murmur a soothing counterpoint to the nervous beating of Leon's heart. As he walked along the winding paths, guided by a stern-faced courtier, he marveled at the beauty that surrounded him. Exotic flowers from the farthest reaches of the realm bloomed in carefully tended beds, while ancient trees stood as silent sentinels, their branches reaching towards the heavens. At last, they arrived at a secluded glade, hidden away from prying eyes by a curtain of weeping willows. Here, the courtier informed Leon he would have his first audience with Queen Alara. The very air seemed to shimmer with anticipation as Leon stepped into the clearing, his senses alert for any sign of the monarch's approach. Time seemed to slow, each moment stretching into eternity as Leon waited. Then, like a vision stepping out of a dream, she appeared. Queen Alara emerged from the shadows of the willow trees, and Leon felt his breath catch in his throat. Tales of her beauty had spread far and wide across the kingdom, but no story could have prepared him for the reality of her presence. Alara moved with the grace of a dancer, each step as fluid as flowing water. Her gown, a masterpiece of silk and starlight, seemed to capture the very essence of the night sky. But it was her eyes that truly captivated Leon, deep pools of midnight blue that held within them wisdom beyond her years and secrets yet untold. As the queen approached, Leon felt a curious mixture of awe and unease wash over him. There was power here, ancient and unknowable, that radiated from Alara like heat from a flame. He found himself kneeling before her, head bowed in reverence, before he had even made the conscious decision to do so. With a voice like honey and smoke, Alara bid him rise. As Leon stood, his eyes met hers, and in that moment, a spark of recognition passed between them. It was as if they had known each other in some past life, their souls recognizing a kindred spirit across the vast expanse of time. The queen spoke of the growing darkness that threatened her kingdom, her words painting a picture of a malevolent force creeping ever closer to the heart of Lunaria. She told of ancient prophecies and dire warnings, of a warrior foretold to stand against the encroaching shadow. With each word, Leon felt the weight of destiny settling more firmly upon his shoulders. As Alara's tale unfolded, the garden around them seemed to fade away, replaced by visions of battles yet to come and challenges still to be faced. Leon saw himself standing at the forefront of an army, his sword raised high against a tide of darkness. He saw the queen beside him, her power a beacon of hope in the gathering gloom. When at last Alara fell silent, the spell of her words lingering in the air like mist, Leon found himself filled with a sense of purpose unlike anything he had ever known. The doubts that had plagued him throughout his journey from Oakvale melted away, replaced by an ironclad determination to fulfill the role for which he had been chosen. Yet even as he pledged his sword and his life to the service of Lunaria and its queen, Leon could not shake the feeling that there was more to this story than met the eye. Something in Alara's gaze, a flicker of emotion quickly hidden, hinted at depths yet to be plumbed and secrets still to be revealed. As the audience drew to a close, Alara bestowed upon Leon a gift, a medallion of silver and sapphire, imbued with ancient magic. Its weight against his chest served as a constant reminder of the oath he had sworn and the destiny he had embraced. With a final, enigmatic smile, Queen Alara took her leave, disappearing back into the shadows of the willow grove as silently as she had arrived. Leon stood rooted to the spot, his mind reeling from the encounter. The air around him still seemed to shimmer with the remnants of her presence, and he found himself already longing for their next meeting. In the days that followed, Leon threw himself into preparation for the trials that lay ahead. He trained with the finest warriors in Lunaria, honing his skills with sword and bow. He pored over ancient texts in the royal library, seeking knowledge of the dark forces that threatened the kingdom. And always, in the back of his mind, burned the image of Queen Alara, a beacon of light and mystery that both inspired and confounded him. As Leon immersed himself in the life of the royal court, he began to sense undercurrents of tension and intrigue swirling beneath the glittering surface. Whispered conversations fell silent at his approach, and he often felt the weight of suspicious gazes upon him. It seemed that not everyone in Lunaria welcomed the arrival of this prophesied hero from a humble village. Yet for every wary glance or veiled threat, there were also those who embraced Leon with open arms. He found allies among the younger members of the court, idealistic souls who saw in him the promise of a brighter future for their kingdom. And always, there was the quiet support of Queen Alara, felt more than seen in the subtle ways she smoothed his path and shielded him from the worst of the court's political machinations. As weeks turned to months, Leon's reputation grew. Tales of his prowess in the training yard and his quick wit in council meetings spread throughout the city. The common people began to whisper of the young warrior who had come to save them, their hopes and dreams crystallizing around the figure of this unlikely hero. But with growing fame came growing danger. Leon became aware of shadowy figures that dogged his steps when he ventured into the city, of eyes that watched him from darkened windows and alleyways. The threat that loomed over Lunaria was drawing closer, and with it, forces that would stop at nothing to see the prophecy fail. Through it all, Leon found his thoughts returning again and again to Queen Ilara. Each brief encounter, each fleeting glance exchanged across a crowded hall only deepened the mystery that surrounded her. He sensed in her a kindred spirit, someone who understood the burden of destiny and the loneliness that came with it. Yet she remained just out of reach, a tantalizing enigma that both frustrated and fascinated him. As autumn painted the gardens of Lunaria in shades of gold and crimson, Leon stood once more in the willow glade where he had first met the queen. The air was crisp with the promise of winter, and fallen leaves crunched beneath his feet as he paced restlessly. He had been summoned here by a hastily scrawled note, its contents cryptic but its urgency clear. When Alara appeared, her face was grave, her usual serene mask replaced by an expression of genuine concern. The time had come, she told him, for him to face his first true test. Dark forces were gathering at the borders of Lunaria, and Leon would need to journey forth to meet them. As she spoke, outlining the dangers that lay ahead and the stakes for which they fought, Leon felt a curious mixture of fear and exhilaration coursing through his veins. This was what he had been preparing for, what all those long months of training and study had been leading towards. Yet as he gazed into Alara's eyes, seeing the worry that she tried so hard to conceal, he realized that he was no longer fighting just for a kingdom or a prophecy. He was fighting for her. With a gesture both regal and oddly vulnerable, Alara reached out and clasped Leon's hand in her own. The touch sent a jolt through him, like lightning captured in his veins. For a moment, the barriers between them fell away, and Leon saw not just a queen, but a woman, strong yet afraid, powerful yet alone. As quickly as it had come, the moment passed. Alara stepped back, once more the untouchable monarch. But something had changed between them, a connection forged that went beyond duty or destiny. As Leon left the glade, setting out on the perilous journey that awaited him, he carried with him not just the weight of a kingdom's hopes, but the memory of a queen's touch and the promise of something more. As Leon journeyed beyond the gleaming walls of Lunaria, the landscape gradually transformed from the cultivated beauty of the royal lands to the wild, untamed frontier. The air grew colder, the shadows deeper, and an oppressive silence settled over the land like a shroud. It was as if nature itself sensed the encroaching darkness and held its breath in fearful anticipation. The young warrior's path led him through dense forests where ancient trees whispered secrets in languages long forgotten. He crossed windswept plains where the grass grew tall and pale, bending like spectral fingers in the chill breeze. At night, huddled by his small campfire, Leon could feel unseen eyes watching him from the darkness, their gaze as tangible as a physical touch. As he traveled, Leon encountered small villages and isolated homesteads. The people he met spoke in hushed tones of strange occurrences plaguing their lands. Crops withered overnight, livestock vanished without a trace, and an unseasonable cold seeped into the very bones of the earth. In their eyes, Leon saw a mixture of hope and desperation. They clung to the rumors of a prophesied hero, seeing in him their last chance for salvation. The weight of their expectations pressed heavily upon Leon's shoulders. In the quiet hours of the night, doubt crept into his heart like a thief. Was he truly the hero they needed? Could he live up to the legacy of the prophecy? But with each dawn, he pushed these thoughts aside, focusing instead on the task at hand and the promise he had made to Queen Alara. As Leon delved deeper into the borderlands, signs of the encroaching darkness became more pronounced. He came across abandoned villages, their houses standing empty and forlorn, as if the inhabitants had simply vanished into thin air. Strange mists clung to the low-lying areas, mists that seemed to whisper and move with a life of their own. It was in one such mist-shrouded valley that Leon encountered his first true test. As he picked his way carefully along a narrow path, the mist suddenly thickened, swirling around him with unnatural speed. From its depths emerged shadowy figures, their forms shifting and indistinct, but their malevolent intent clear. Leon's sword sang as he drew it from its sheath, the silver blade gleaming with an inner light that pushed back the encroaching darkness. The battle that followed was like nothing he had ever experienced. His foes were more shadow than substance, their attacks coming from all directions at once. Each strike of his blade seemed to pass through them without effect, yet their claws left very real gashes in his armor and flesh. As the fight wore on, Leon felt his strength beginning to falter. The very air seemed to drain his energy, each breath a struggle against the oppressive weight of the mist. In that moment of desperation, he remembered the medallion given to him by Queen Alara. As his hand clasped the silver and sapphire disc, warmth flooded through him, chasing away the bone-deep chill. With renewed vigor, Leon fought on. He discovered that by channeling his will through the medallion, he could imbue his blade with a power that could harm even these insubstantial foes. The battle raged for what seemed like hours, but at last, with a final, mighty sweep of his sword, Leon dispelled the last of the shadow creatures. As the mist retreated, Leon sank to his knees, exhausted but victorious. The encounter had left him shaken, not just by the ferocity of the attack, but by the realization of just how powerful and alien the forces arrayed against him truly were. This was no mere border dispute or political intrigue, but a battle against an evil as old as time itself. In the days that followed, Leon pressed on, his senses alert for any sign of further attacks. He began to piece together a pattern in the reports he gathered from the scattered settlements he passed. The incidents of darkness seemed to be emanating from a central point, a place spoken of only in whispers and fearful glances. Deep in the heart of the borderlands lay the ruins of an ancient city, its name long lost to history. Local legends spoke of it as a place of great power and even greater tragedy, a city that had fallen to darkness in ages past. It was to this forsaken place that Leon now turned his steps, certain that he would find the source of the evil threatening Lunaria. As he drew closer to his goal, the land itself seemed to resist his progress. Storms lashed the countryside, winds howled with unnatural fury, and the very ground beneath his feet sometimes shifted and changed, as if trying to lead him astray. Yet Leon pressed on, guided by an inner compass that always pointed him towards his destination. Throughout his journey, Leon's thoughts often turned to Queen Alara. The memory of her touch, of the connection they had shared in that brief, unguarded moment, sustained him through the darkest hours. He wondered what she was doing, whether she faced challenges of her own back in the glittering courts of Lunaria. At times, he fancied he could feel her presence, a comforting warmth that wrapped around him like a cloak, shielding him from the worst of the encroaching evil. On the eve of his arrival at the ruined city, Leon made camp on a hill overlooking the desolate landscape. As he sat by his fire, gazing out into the gathering gloom, a sense of foreboding settled over him. Whatever awaited him in those ancient ruins would change the course of his life, and perhaps the fate of the entire kingdom. As he drifted off into an uneasy sleep, Leon's dreams were filled with visions of shadow and flame, of battles yet to be fought and choices yet to be made. And through it all, like a beacon of hope in the darkness, shone the image of Queen Alara, her eyes filled with a mixture of concern and something deeper, something that made his heart race even in slumber. With the first light of dawn, Leon rose, his resolve hardened by the trials he had faced and the challenges yet to come. As he gathered his gear and prepared to descend into the Valley of Shadows, he sent a silent prayer to whatever powers might be listening, not for his own safety, but for the strength to face whatever lay ahead and to protect the kingdom and the queen he had sworn to defend. The ruined city loomed before him, a sprawling maze of crumbling stone and twisted metal. As Leon took his first steps into the shadow of its broken walls, he felt as if he were crossing a threshold not just in space, but in time. Whatever secrets lay hidden in the depths of this forsaken place, he was determined to uncover them, no matter the cost. With sword in hand and the queen's medallion pulsing warmly against his chest, Leon ventured into the heart of darkness, ready to confront the evil that threatened all he held dear. The true test of his courage, his skill, and his destiny was about to begin. The ruins of the ancient city loomed before Leon, a labyrinth of crumbling stone and twisted metal, reaching towards a sky heavy with ominous clouds. As he ventured deeper into the heart of this forsaken place, the very air seemed to thicken, pressing against him like an invisible barrier. Each step forward was a battle of will, as if the city itself sought to repel his intrusion. Shadows danced at the edge of Leon's vision, always just out of sight, their whispers a constant, maddening presence. The young warrior's hand never strayed far from the hilt of his sword, its familiar weight a comforting anchor in this sea of uncertainty. The medallion gifted to him by Queen Alara pulsed warmly against his chest, a reminder of his purpose and a beacon of hope in the encroaching darkness. As Leon navigated the winding streets and collapsed buildings, he began to uncover signs of a more recent presence amidst the ancient ruins. Fresh scorch marks marred crumbling walls, and the ground bore the unmistakable tracks of both men and beasts. It seemed he was not the only one drawn to this place of power and mystery. The trail led him to the heart of the ruined city, where a massive structure rose above the surrounding devastation. Once a grand temple or palace, it now stood as a hollow shell of its former glory. Yet even in decay, it radiated an aura of power that made the hair on the back of Leon's neck stand on end. As he approached the entrance, a figure emerged from the shadows, blade gleaming in the dim light. The stranger was clad in armor as black as night, their face hidden behind a helm adorned with twisting horns. Without a word, they attacked, their sword a blur of deadly precision. Leon barely had time to draw his own weapon before the assault was upon him. The clash of steel on steel rang out through the empty ruins as the two warriors engaged in a deadly dance. His opponent moved with inhuman speed and grace, each strike aimed with lethal intent. It was all Leon could do to parry and dodge, searching desperately for an opening in his foe's defense. As the battle raged on, Leon felt himself being slowly driven back, step by step. His mysterious opponent seemed to anticipate his every move, countering with a skill born of centuries of practice. For the first time since leaving Lunaria, Leon felt the cold grip of fear closing around his heart. Had he come all this way, only to fall at the threshold of his goal? In that moment of doubt, Leon's hand brushed against the medallion at his chest. A surge of warmth flooded through him, and with it came a clarity of purpose that burned away his fear like mist before the sun. He was more than just a village swordsmith thrust into the role of hero. He was the chosen warrior of Lunaria, bearer of an ancient prophecy. And he would not falter now. With renewed determination, Leon went on the offensive. His blade became an extension of his will, guided by an instinct that seemed to flow from the very stone beneath his feet. He pressed his attack, forcing his opponent to give ground for the first time since their duel began. The two warriors circled each other, their blades a whirlwind of steel and sparks. Leon could feel the tide of battle turning, his strikes coming closer and closer to breaching his foe's defenses. With a final, mighty blow, he shattered his opponent's sword, sending the black-clad warrior stumbling backward. As Leon raised his blade for the killing stroke, a sound stopped him cold. Laughter, rich and melodious, echoed through the ruins. His opponent reached up and removed their helm, revealing a face that made Leon's heart skip a beat. Long hair the color of midnight cascaded down, framing features that were at once familiar and utterly alien. It was Queen Alara who stood before him, yet not as he had known her in Lunaria. Gone was the regal poise and serene demeanor. In its place was a wild, feral grace that spoke of ancient power and hidden depths. Her eyes, once a deep blue, now swirled with colors beyond mortal comprehension. Well fought, my champion. Elara's voice carried notes of both approval and amusement. You have proven yourself worthy of the trials that lie ahead. Leon lowered his sword, his mind reeling from this unexpected turn of events. My queen? I don't understand. Why are you here? What is the meaning of this deception? Elara's smile held secrets as old as the ruins that surrounded them. The journey you have undertaken is more than just a quest to save a kingdom, Leon. It is a pilgrimage of the soul, a test of not just your skill, but your very essence. As she spoke, the air around them seemed to shimmer and twist. The ruined city faded away like mist in the morning sun, replaced by a vast chamber of polished stone. Pillars of light stretched from floor to ceiling, pulsing with an inner radiance that filled the space with an otherworldly glow. Welcome, Elara gestured to their surroundings, to the true heart of Lunaria. Here, hidden from mortal eyes, lies the source of our kingdom's power and the key to its salvation. Leon's gaze darted around the chamber, trying to take in the impossible sights that surrounded him. Ancient symbols covered the walls, seeming to move and shift when viewed from the corner of his eye. At the center of the room stood a dais, upon which rested a sword unlike any he had ever seen. Its blade seemed to be forged from pure starlight, its hilt adorned with gems that burned with an inner fire. The prophecy speaks not just of a warrior, Elara continued, her voice taking on a resonance that seemed to come from the very stones around them, but of a union, a joining of two souls, each incomplete without the other. Only together can they hope to face the darkness that threatens to consume all. As the full import of her words sank in, Leon felt as if the ground had fallen away beneath his feet. The connection he had felt with Elara from their very first meeting, the pull that had drawn him across the kingdom and through countless perils, suddenly made sense in a way that both exhilarated and terrified him. You are more than just a queen, he said softly, the truth of it settling into his bones. And I am more than just a village swordsmith. We are two halves of a greater whole. Elara nodded, her eyes shining with a mixture of pride and something deeper, more primal. Now you begin to understand, but knowing is only the first step. To truly fulfill our destiny, we must forge a bond stronger than steel, more enduring than stone. She held out her hand to him, an invitation and a challenge wrapped in one. Are you ready, Leon of Oakvale, to embrace your true destiny, to stand with me against the coming storm, not just as champion and queen, but as equals in power and purpose? Leon looked at the offered hand, then back to Elara's face. In her eyes, he saw reflected all the doubts and fears that had plagued him since leaving his village. But he also saw hope and a promise of something greater than he had ever dared to dream. With a deep breath, Leon reached out and clasped Elara's hand in his own. The moment their fingers touched, a surge of power unlike anything he had ever experienced coursed through him. It was as if every cell in his body was awakening, aligning with a greater purpose that transcended mortal understanding. As they stood there, hands joined and destinies intertwined, Leon knew that his journey was far from over. The true battle against the encroaching darkness was yet to come. But for the first time since leaving Oakvale, he felt truly ready. to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, warrior and queen, they turned to face the trials that awaited them, their hearts beating as one, their souls united in a bond that would shake the very foundations of the world. The chamber of light faded around Leon and Alara, the ethereal glow giving way to the cold reality of the ruined city. As the last vestiges of the vision dissipated, Leon found himself standing once more amidst the crumbling stones, his hand still clasped tightly in Alara's. The warmth of their connection lingered, a stark contrast to the chill that permeated the air. Alara's eyes, now returned to their familiar deep blue, held a mixture of determination and concern as she gazed at Leon. "What we have seen is but a glimpse of what could be," she said softly. "The path ahead is fraught with danger, and the choices we make will shape not just our fates, but the destiny of the entire kingdom." As if in response to her words, a cold wind swept through the ruins, carrying with it whispers of ancient malice. The shadows seemed to deepen, crawling across the ground like living things, hungry and restless. Leon tightened his grip on his sword, every sense alert for signs of danger. "We cannot linger here," Alara warned, her voice taking on a tone of urgency. "The enemy knows we have come. Even now, they gather their forces against us." With a grace that belied her earlier ferocity, Alara led Leon deeper into the heart of the ruined city. As they navigated the maze of fallen buildings and overgrown streets, she spoke of the true nature of the threat they faced. The darkness that threatened Lunaria was no mere invading army or political machination. It was an ancient evil, as old as the kingdom itself, that had lain dormant for centuries. Now, awakened by forces yet unknown, it sought to reclaim the land it had once held in its grip. Leon listened intently, his mind reeling from the magnitude of the task before them. The battle he had trained for, the destiny he thought he understood, paled in comparison to the truth Alara now revealed. As they walked, Leon began to notice subtle changes in their surroundings. The ruins seemed to shift and change when viewed from the corner of his eye, revealing glimpses of the grandeur that had once been. It was as if the very stones remembered their former glory and sought to show it to these two who might be their salvation. Their path led them to a vast plaza at the city's center. Here, the devastation was most pronounced, with great chasms splitting the earth and twisted remnants of once mighty structures reaching towards the sky like grasping fingers. At the heart of the plaza stood an obelisk of obsidian, its surface unmarred by the ravages of time. As they approached, Leon felt a sense of dread washing over him. The air around the obelisk seemed to ripple and distort, and whispers just beyond the edge of hearing teased at his consciousness. Alara's face was grim as she gazed upon the dark monument. "This is the anchor of their power," she explained, her voice barely above a whisper. "So long as it stands, the forces of darkness have a foothold in our world." Leon studied the obelisk, searching for some weakness, some flaw that might be exploited. But its surface remained impenetrable, a void that seemed to swallow light itself. As they stood there, contemplating their next move, a sound broke the eerie silence. Footsteps, many of them, echoed through the ruins. From every shadow, every crumbling doorway, figures began to emerge. They moved with an unnatural fluidity, their forms seeming to waver and shift in the dim light. Leon and Alara stood back to back, weapons at the ready, as they found themselves surrounded by a host of shadowy figures. The air grew thick with malevolent energy, pressing down upon them like a physical weight. "Remember your training," Alara murmured, her voice steady despite the dire circumstances. "Remember who you are, what we fight for." As the first wave of shadow creatures surged forward, Leon felt a calm settle over him. The medallion at his chest pulsed with warmth, its power flowing through him and into his blade. With Alara at his side, moving in perfect synchronization, he met the onslaught head-on. The battle that followed was like nothing Leon had ever experienced. The shadow creatures were relentless, each one felled only to be replaced by two more. His blade sang as it cut through the air, leaving trails of light that seared the darkness. Alara fought with a grace and power that took his breath away. Her movements were fluid, almost dance-like, as she wove spells of light and fire that kept the worst of the horde at bay. Together, they formed an impenetrable defense, their strengths complementing each other in perfect harmony. As the fight wore on, Leon began to sense a pattern in the attacks. The shadow creatures, for all their ferocity, seemed to be herding them away from the obsidian obelisk. Whatever power the dark monolith held, it was clear that their enemies feared its destruction. With a shared glance, Leon and Alara understood what needed to be done. Fighting their way through the press of bodies, they inched closer to the obelisk. Each step was bought with sweat and blood, the shadow creatures growing ever more frenzied in their attempts to drive them back. At last, they stood before the dark monument. Up close, its surface seemed to writhe and pulse, as if alive with some terrible inner energy. Leon raised his sword, channeling all of his strength and will into a single mighty blow. As his blade struck the obsidian surface, a shock wave of power exploded outward. Leon was thrown backward, his ears ringing from the thunderous crack that split the air. Through blurred vision, he saw fissures of light spreading across the obelisk's surface. Alara was at his side in an instant, helping him to his feet. Around them, the shadow creatures wailed in anguish, their forms beginning to dissipate like smoke in the wind. The very ground beneath their feet trembled and shook as the obelisk's power waned. With a final, ear-splitting shriek, the obsidian monument shattered. Shards of dark stone rained down around them as a blinding light erupted from the obelisk's core. Leon shielded his eyes, feeling the last vestiges of the dark power being driven back. As the light faded and the dust settled, Leon and Alara found themselves standing in a transformed plaza. The oppressive atmosphere had lifted, and the first rays of true sunlight in centuries began to peek through the clouds above. But their victory was far from complete. Though they had struck a significant blow against the forces of darkness, both knew that this was but the first battle in a long war. The enemy had been driven back, but not defeated. As they surveyed the battlefield, now eerily quiet in the aftermath of their struggle, Alara turned to Leon. Her eyes held a mixture of pride, determination, and something deeper, a connection that went beyond words. "We have won the day," she said softly, but our journey is far from over. The path ahead will test us in ways we cannot yet imagine." Leon nodded, understanding the weight of her words. As he gazed at Alara, streaked with dust and blood, yet radiant with an inner light, he knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Hand in hand, the warrior and the queen turned their steps towards home, leaving the ruined city behind. The road back to Lunaria stretched before them, fraught with unseen dangers and untold possibilities. But for now, in this moment of hard-won peace, they allowed themselves to hope for the future they had glimpsed, a future they would fight with all their strength to bring into being. The journey back to Lunaria was a stark contrast to Leon's initial voyage. Where once he had traveled alone, now he walked side by side with Queen Alara. The land itself seemed to respond to their passage, the oppressive darkness that had blanketed the borderlands slowly receding like a tide going out. As they traveled, Leon and Alara spoke at length, sharing the burdens of their respective roles and the weight of the destiny they now knew they shared. Leon learned of the ancient magics that flowed through Alara's veins, passed down through generations of Lunarian rulers. In turn, he shared stories of his simple life in Oakvale, of the forge where he had honed his craft, never knowing the greater purpose for which he was being prepared. Their conversations were punctuated by moments of comfortable silence, a deeper understanding growing between them with each passing day. The connection they had forged in the heart of the ruined city continued to strengthen, a bond that went beyond mere words or physical attraction. As they drew closer to the capital, they began to encounter signs of the changes wrought by their actions. Villages that had been abandoned were slowly coming back to life, their inhabitants cautiously returning to reclaim their homes. The unseasonable cold that had gripped the land was giving way to the natural warmth of late summer. Yet not all was well. Rumors reached them of pockets of darkness still lingering in remote areas, of creatures born of shadow that continued to prey upon the unwary. It became clear that while they had struck a significant blow against the enemy, the war was far from over. On the eve of their return to Lunaria, as they made camp in a sheltered glade, Alara's demeanor grew somber. "Leon," she said softly, her eyes reflecting the flickering firelight, "there is something you must know before we return to the capital." Leon listened intently as Alara spoke of the price of their victory. The power they had unleashed in destroying the obsidian obelisk had not come without cost. The ancient magics that protected Lunaria, maintained by generations of rulers, had been severely weakened. To restore the barriers that keep our kingdom safe, Alara explained, her voice heavy with the weight of her words, a great sacrifice will be required. The throne of Lunaria must be renewed with the lifeblood of its ruler. The implications of her words hit Leon like a physical blow. "You mean?" he began, unable to finish the thought. Alara nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of resignation and determination. "Yes, to save the kingdom, I must give my life." Leon felt as if the ground had fallen away beneath him. After everything they had been through, after the connection they had forged and the future they had glimpsed, the thought of losing Alara was unbearable. "There must be another way," he insisted, his mind racing to find an alternative. We'll consult the royal archives, seek out ancient wisdom. Surely there's a solution that doesn't require such a sacrifice." Ilara's smile was tinged with sadness as she reached out to cup Leon's cheek. "My brave warrior," she said softly, "always ready to fight, even against fate itself. But some battles cannot be won with sword or spell. This is the duty I was born to, the purpose for which I was prepared my entire life." As the night deepened around them, Leon and Ilara sat in close embrace, each lost in their own thoughts. The victory they had achieved now seemed hollow in the face of its cost. Yet even in this dark moment, the bond between them remained unshakable, a beacon of hope in the gathering gloom. With the first light of dawn, they resumed their journey, the gleaming spires of Lunaria visible on the horizon. As they approached the city gates, Leon could sense a change in Ilara. The wild, feral energy that had emanated from her in the ruined city was now contained. Hidden behind a mask of regal composure, the city erupted in celebration at their return. Streets were lined with cheering crowds, flower petals rained down from windows, and the air was filled with music and laughter. Yet to Leon, it all seemed distant, unreal. His eyes never left Ilara as she moved through the throng, every inch the triumphant queen returning from battle. In the days that followed, Leon watched as Ilara prepared for the ritual that would renew Lunaria's defenses. She met with her advisors, put the kingdom's affairs in order, and spent long hours in the sacred chambers beneath the palace. Through it all, she maintained a serene demeanor, accepting her fate with a grace that both awed and frustrated Leon. On the night before the ritual was to take place, Leon found Ilara in the palace gardens, gazing up at the stars. Without a word, he moved to stand beside her, their hands instinctively finding each other. "I can't accept this," Leon said at last, breaking the silence. "There has to be another way. Let me take your place. My life for the kingdom's safety." Ilara turned to face him, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Oh, Leon," she whispered, "don't you see? It must be me. The magic requires not just a life, but the life of the rightful ruler. Your sacrifice, noble as it is, would not be enough." As Leon opened his mouth to protest further, Ilara silenced him with a gentle finger to his lips. "But there is something you can do," she continued. "Something only you can do." She spoke then of a vision she had received during her meditations, of a quest that would take Leon to the farthest reaches of the kingdom and beyond, seeking out ancient artifacts of power that could, in time, restore the magical barriers without the need for further sacrifice. "It will be a journey fraught with danger," Ilara warned, "and there is no guarantee of success. But it offers hope for Lunaria and hope for us." Leon listened, his heart torn between the desire to stay by Ilara's side in her final hours, and the knowledge that this quest might be the only way to save her. In the end, there was really no choice at all. As the first light of dawn broke over Lunaria, Leon stood at the city gates, provisions packed and his trusted sword at his side. Ilara stood before him, resplendent in her royal regalia, every inch the queen he had pledged to serve. Their farewell was brief. The words they exchanged meant for their ears alone. As Leon turned to begin his journey, Ilara called out one last time, "Remember, my love, Her voice carried on the morning breeze. No matter what happens, no matter how dark the path may seem, know that my heart goes with you. Always. With those words echoing in his ears, Leon set out on his new quest. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but he walked with purpose, driven by love and the hope of a future yet to be written. Behind him, the sun rose over Lunaria, bathing the city in golden light, as it prepared for the ritual that would ensure its survival and forever change the course of its history. The road stretched endlessly before Leon as he journeyed away from Lunaria, each step carrying him further from the woman he loved and closer to an uncertain destiny. The weight of his quest pressed heavily upon him, a constant reminder of what was at stake. Yet mingled with the sorrow of parting was a fierce determination. He would find a way to save Alara and the kingdom, no matter the cost. Days blended into weeks as Leon traveled, following the cryptic clues Alara had provided. His path led him through lands he had never dreamed existed, vast deserts where the sand whispered ancient secrets, primordial forests where the very trees seemed to watch his passage, and mountain ranges that scraped the belly of the heavens. Throughout his journey, Leon encountered remnants of a bygone age. Crumbling ruins dotted the landscape, their weathered stones holding memories of a time when magic flowed freely through the world. In these places, Leon felt echoes of the power he had experienced in the heart of the ruined city, a resonance that seemed to call to something deep within his soul. It was in one such ruin, nestled high in a mist-shrouded mountain pass, that Leon made his first significant discovery. The ancient temple, its walls covered in faded frescoes, depicting long-forgotten rituals, held at its heart a chamber sealed for millennia. As Leon approached the sealed door, the medallion Alara had given him began to pulse with warmth. With trembling hands, Leon pressed the medallion against the door. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with the grinding of stone on stone, the door began to open, revealing a chamber bathed in soft, ethereal light. At the center of the room stood a pedestal, and upon it rested an orb of swirling energy. As Leon drew near, he felt a surge of power, unlike anything he had experienced before. This, he knew without doubt, was one of the artifacts Alara had sent him to find. As his fingers closed around the orb, visions flooded his mind. He saw Lunaria as it had been in ages past, a shining beacon of magic and knowledge. He saw the first rulers forging the barriers that would protect their realm, drawing upon powers that mortal minds could scarcely comprehend. And then, like a shadow falling across the sun, he saw the coming of the darkness. He witnessed the desperate battles fought to hold it at bay, the sacrifices made to maintain the kingdom's defenses. In that moment, Leon understood the true weight of the burden Alara had borne all her life. With the orb secured, Leon continued his quest. Each artifact he sought presented its own challenges, testing not just his strength and skill, but his wisdom and compassion as well. In the depths of an ancient forest, he negotiated a truce between warring factions of nature spirits to gain access to a grove where a powerful scepter lay hidden. Beneath the scorching sun of a vast desert, he solved riddles left by long-dead sorcerers to unlock the secrets of a magical amulet. As Leon collected each artifact, he felt the power within him growing. The connection he shared with Ilara, though stretched thin by distance, seemed to pulse with renewed strength. Through this bond, he sensed that time was growing short. The ritual to renew Lunaria's defenses drew near, and with it, the moment of Ilara's sacrifice. Driven by this knowledge, Leon pressed on, pushing himself to the limits of his endurance. His final destination loomed before him, a desolate island far out in the uncharted seas. Here, legend spoke of a nexus of magical energy, a place where the barriers between worlds grew thin. The journey to the island was perilous. Storms lashed at Leon's small vessel, and creatures born of nightmare rose from the depths to bar his path. Yet he persevered, his determination unshakable. As he set foot on the island's shore, Leon felt a shift in the very air around him. Reality seemed to waver, like heat shimmer on a summer's day. Before him rose a structure unlike any he had ever seen, a tower that seemed to be built of light and shadow, its form constantly shifting and changing. With the artifacts he had gathered clutched tightly to his chest, Leon began the ascent. Each step was a battle against forces that sought to unmake him, to scatter his essence to the winds. But with every floor he climbed, Leon felt his purpose crystallizing, his resolve hardening. At last, he reached the pinnacle of the tower. Here, suspended in midair, was a sphere of pure energy, the final piece needed to complete his quest. As Leon reached out to grasp it, he felt a presence materialize beside him. He turned to find Ilara standing there, her form translucent and shimmering. "My love," she said, her voice echoing as if from a great distance, "you have done it. You have gathered the power needed to save our kingdom." Leon's heart soared at the sight of her, even in this ethereal form. "Then we can stop the ritual?" he asked, hope surging through him. "You don't have to sacrifice yourself?" Ilara's smile was tinged with sadness. "The ritual has already begun," she said softly. "Even now, my life force ebbs. But with the power you have gathered, we can complete the renewal of our barriers without the need for my death." Realization dawned on Leon. "You knew," he breathed. "You knew I wouldn't make it back in time to stop the ritual from starting." Ilara nodded. "I had faith in you, my love. Faith that you would succeed, even if not in the way we had originally hoped. Now, we must act quickly. Take my hand, and together we will channel this power to save Lunaria." Without hesitation, Leon clasped Ilara's spectral hand in his own. As their fingers intertwined, he felt a surge of energy unlike anything he had ever experienced. The artifacts he had gathered began to glow, their power joining with the sphere of energy at the tower's peak. In that moment, Leon saw not just with his eyes, but with his very soul. He saw the web of magic that enveloped Lunaria, saw the weakening barriers that protected it from the encroaching darkness. And with Ilara by his side, he began to weave the ancient magics anew. Light exploded outward from the tower, washing over the island and spreading across the sea. Leon felt the power flowing through him, reshaping reality itself. In Lunaria, far distant, he sensed the renewal of the kingdom's defenses, stronger now than they had ever been. As the last of the energy dissipated, Leon found himself once more alone atop the tower. But in his heart, he felt Alara's presence, stronger than ever before. Somehow, he knew that she lived, that the sacrifice had been averted. With a heart full of hope and purpose renewed, Leon began his journey back to Lunaria. The path ahead was long, but he walked it with a spring in his step and joy in his heart. For he knew that at the end of that road, Alara waited for him, and with her, a future brighter than any they had dared to dream. The journey back to Lunaria seemed to pass in the blink of an eye for Leon, his heart light with the knowledge of his success and the anticipation of reunion. As he crested the final hill overlooking the capital, he paused to take in the sight before him. The city gleamed in the morning sun, its spires reaching towards the heavens, surrounded by an aura of renewed vitality that was almost palpable. As Leon approached the city gates, he noticed a change in the very air around him. The magical barriers he and Alara had reinforced hummed with power, invisible to the eye, but unmistakable to those attuned to such forces. The guards at the gate, recognizing him instantly, bowed deeply before ushering him inside with reverent whispers. Word of his arrival spread through the city like wildfire. As he made his way towards the palace, crowds gathered to catch a glimpse of the hero who had saved their kingdom. Flowers rained down from balconies, and cheers echoed off the stone walls of the city. Yet Leon barely noticed, his eyes fixed on the palace that loomed ahead, his thoughts focused solely on Alara. At the palace steps, a familiar figure awaited him. Alara stood there, radiant in the morning light, her eyes shining with unshed tears of joy. As their gazes met, the world around them seemed to fall away. In 3 quick strides, Leon closed the distance between them, sweeping Alara into his arms, in an embrace that spoke volumes more than words ever could. "You did it," Alara whispered against his chest, her voice thick with emotion. "You saved us all." Leon pulled back just enough to look into her eyes, his hand gently cupping her cheek. "We did it," he corrected softly. "Together, as it was always meant to be." Their reunion was witnessed by the entire court, nobles and servants alike, watching with a mixture of awe and tender emotion as their queen and her champion stood locked in an embrace that spoke of trials overcome and a love that had conquered even death. In the days that followed, Leon and Alara worked tirelessly to understand and harness the new powers they had unlocked. The artifacts Leon had gathered were carefully studied, their secrets slowly unraveling to reveal knowledge long lost to the ages. Under their combined leadership, Lunaria entered a new golden age, magic and wisdom flowing freely once more. Yet even as they reveled in their victory and the peace it had brought, both Leon and Alara knew that their greatest challenges lay ahead. The darkness they had pushed back was not defeated, merely contained. It would gather its strength and return, as it always had throughout the long cycles of history. But now, they faced this future not with fear, but with hope and determination. For they had each other, and in their union, they had found a strength greater than any they had known before. As summer gave way to autumn, and the leaves in the palace gardens turned to gold, Leon and Alara stood hand in hand on a balcony overlooking the city. The sun was setting, painting the sky in breathtaking hues of orange and purple. "What do you see when you look out there?" Ilara asked softly, her head resting on Leon's shoulder. Leon was silent for a moment, his gaze sweeping over the city and the lands beyond. "I see hope," he said at last. "I see a future worth fighting for." Ilara smiled, squeezing his hand gently. "As do I, my love, as do I." As twilight deepened into night, stars began to twinkle in the vast expanse above. Leon and Ilara remained on the balcony, their silhouettes merging into one as they stood vigil over the kingdom they had sworn to protect. They knew that whatever challenges the future might hold, they would face them together, the warrior and the queen, bound by love, duty, and a destiny greater than either of them had ever imagined. And so, as Lunaria slumbered peacefully below, secure in the knowledge that its guardians watched over it, Leon and Ilara looked to the horizon. There, where the edge of the world met the infinite sky, they saw not an ending, but a new beginning, a future filled with endless possibilities, waiting to be written by their own hands. The tale of the warrior and the sensual queen had reached its culmination, but their story was far from over. For in the grand tapestry of fate, their legend was but a single thread, albeit a bright and shining one, in a pattern that would continue to unfold for ages to come. As seasons turned and years passed, Lunaria flourished under the combined rule of Leon and Ilara. The kingdom entered an era of unprecedented prosperity, with magic and innovation working hand in hand to improve the lives of all its citizens. The once humble swordsmith and the enigmatic queen had become living legends, their love story whispered as a tale of hope and perseverance throughout the land. Yet, as with all things, this period of peace was not destined to last forever. On the 10th anniversary of their victory over the darkness, as Lunaria prepared for grand celebrations, a new threat began to stir on the kingdom's borders. Reports trickled in from the outlying provinces of strange occurrences. Crops withered overnight, animals vanished without a trace, and an unseasonable chill crept across the land. To those who remembered, these signs were all too familiar, echoes of the darkness they had fought so hard to contain. Leon and Ilara, their faces now bearing the subtle marks of a decade's passage, stood in the war room of the palace, poring over maps and dispatches. The weight of the kingdom's fate once again rested heavily upon their shoulders. "It's happening again," Leon said softly, his finger tracing the path of the disturbances across the map. "The darkness is testing our defenses." Ilara nodded, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Yes, but this time it's different. The pattern is strange. It's as if the darkness is searching for something." As they debated their next move, a messenger burst into the room, out of breath and wide-eyed with urgency. "Your Majesties," he gasped, "a delegation has arrived at the gates. They claim to be from beyond the void realms." Leon and Ilara exchanged a startled glance. The void realms were spoken of only in the most ancient of texts, a place of mystery and danger that existed beyond the boundaries of their known world. For emissaries to come from such a place could only mean that events of cosmic significance were unfolding. The delegation, when brought before the royal couple, was unlike anything they had ever seen. Beings of living shadow and pulsing light, their forms constantly shifting and changing, stood in stark contrast to the opulent surroundings of the throne room. Their leader, a figure of swirling mist and starlight, stepped forward to address Leon and Alara, guardians of Lunaria. The being's voice echoed in their minds rather than their ears. "We come bearing grave tidings. The balance between light and darkness, which has maintained the stability of all realms, is faltering. The encroaching shadow you face is but a symptom of a far greater catastrophe looming on the horizon." As the emissary spoke, visions flooded Leon and Alara's minds. They saw worlds beyond imagining, realms of pure energy and thought, all threatened by a creeping void that consumed everything in its path. They understood then that their battle was part of a much larger conflict, one that spanned dimensions and realities beyond their comprehension. The leader of the delegation continued, "We have watched you, warrior and queen, since you first united to save your kingdom. Your bond, forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by true love, holds a power greater than you know. It is this power that we now call upon to help restore the cosmic balance." Leon stepped forward, his hand instinctively seeking Alara's. "Tell us what we must do," he said, his voice steady despite the enormity of what they faced. The answer, when it came, was both simpler and more complex than they could have imagined. To save not just Lunaria, but all of existence, Leon and Alara would need to embark on a journey beyond the boundaries of their world. They would have to traverse the void realms, facing trials that would test not just their strength and courage, but the very essence of their bond. As the full import of this task settled upon them, Leon and Alara shared a look of understanding. This was not a burden they could place on anyone else's shoulders. Just as they had risen to the challenge a decade ago, they would do so again, not just for their kingdom, but for all of creation. The preparations for their departure were made in haste, for every moment lost allowed the creeping void to grow stronger. On the night before they were to leave, Leon and Alara stood once more on the balcony, where they had often found solace in each other's company. "Are you afraid?" Alara asked softly, her hand entwined with Leon's as they gazed out over the sleeping city. Leon was silent for a moment before answering. "Yes," he admitted, "but not of what we might face out there. I'm afraid of failing, of letting down not just Lunaria, but all the realms that are counting on us." Alara turned to face him, her eyes shining with a mixture of love and determination. "We won't fail," she said with quiet certainty. "As long as we're together, there's nothing we cannot overcome." As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Leon and Alara stood at the center of a complex magical array, surrounded by the delegation from the void realms. The air crackled with energy as ancient incantations were spoken, opening a portal to realms beyond mortal understanding. With a final look at the kingdom they had sworn to protect, Leon and Alara stepped into the swirling vortex. They left behind a world holding its breath, waiting for the return of its beloved guardians. And as they vanished from sight, hand in hand and hearts beating as one, the legend of the warrior and the sensual queen entered a new chapter, one that would be written across the very fabric of reality itself. The transition through the portal was unlike anything Leon or Alara had ever experienced. Colors they had no names for swirled around them, and sensations beyond description flooded their senses. For what seemed like an eternity, and yet no time at all, they fell through the spaces between worlds, their only anchor the unwavering grip of each other's hands. When at last they found solid ground beneath their feet, Leon and Alara opened their eyes to a realm that defied comprehension. The landscape before them shifted constantly, mountains flowing like water, and forests made of crystalline structures that sang with ethereal voices. The sky above was a kaleidoscope of swirling energies, punctuated by what looked like tears in the very fabric of reality. "Welcome," a voice echoed around them, "to the nexus of realities." Their guide materialized before them, a being of pure energy that coalesced into a vaguely humanoid form. "I am Aeon, keeper of the crossroads. Your journey through the void realms begins here." As Aeon spoke, the full magnitude of their quest became clear. The Nexus was a focal point where countless realities intersected, and it was from here that the balance between light and darkness was maintained. But now, that balance was under threat from an ancient evil that sought to consume all of existence. "Your task," Aeon explained, "is to travel to the heart of the void and confront the source of this imbalance. But be warned, the journey will test you in ways you cannot imagine. The bond between you is strong, but it must become unbreakable if you are to succeed." With those ominous words, Aeon gestured, and a path of shimmering light appeared before them, leading off into the ever-changing landscape. Leon and Alara exchanged a determined glance before setting off, their steps in perfect unison. Their journey through the void realms was a tapestry of wonders and horrors beyond mortal understanding. They traversed fields of sentient stardust, battled creatures born from the nightmares of dying gods, and navigated labyrinths that folded in on themselves in impossible ways. Throughout it all, Leon and Alara's connection deepened. They found themselves communicating without words, moving in perfect synchronization, as if they were two halves of a single being. The trials they faced forced them to rely on each other completely, to trust in ways they never had before. In a realm of eternal twilight, they encountered echoes of their past selves' shadow versions of the people they had once been. Filled with doubt and fear, these specters taunted them with their deepest insecurities, trying to drive a wedge between them. But Leon and Alara stood firm, their love and trust in each other serving as a beacon that banished the shadows. As they drew closer to the heart of the void, the challenges grew more intense. They faced temptations of unimaginable power, offers to rewrite reality itself to their whims. But each time, they chose each other and the greater good over personal gain. Finally, after what could have been days or centuries, they reached their destination. The heart of the void was a maelstrom of raw, chaotic energy, at the center of which pulsed a singularity of pure darkness. This, they realized, was the source of the imbalance, an ancient evil that sought to unmake all of creation. As they stood on the precipice, preparing to confront this ultimate darkness, Leon turned to Alara. Words seemed inadequate in the face of what they had experienced and what they were about to face. Instead, he simply pulled her close, pouring all of his love, trust, and devotion into a single passionate kiss. When they parted, both were glowing with an inner light that pushed back the encroaching darkness. They realized then that their bond, the love they shared, was the key to restoring balance. It was a force as fundamental to the universe as light and dark themselves, hand in hand, glowing with the power of their united souls. Leon and Alara stepped into the maelstrom. The battle that followed was not one of swords or sorcery, but of will and love against the very essence of destruction. They poured everything they were into, containing and transforming the dark energy, using their bond to channel the light of creation itself. In a blinding flash that resonated across all realities, balance was restored. The heart of the void was transformed, no longer a threat, but a neutral force necessary for the continuation of existence. Leon and Alara found themselves back in the Nexus, exhausted but triumphant. Aeon appeared before them, its form somehow both more solid and more ethereal than before. "You have succeeded where countless others have failed," it intoned. "The balance is restored, and all of creation owes you a debt that can never be repaid." As a reward for their service, Aeon offered them a choice: to remain as guardians of the Nexus, watching over the balance of all realities, or to return to Lunaria with the knowledge and power they had gained. Leon and Alara's decision was immediate and unanimous. Their place was in Lunaria, with the people and the kingdom they had sworn to protect. But they would do so now with a deeper understanding of their place in the grand tapestry of existence. And so, with a final blessing from Aeon, Leon and Alara returned to their world. They emerged from the portal in the exact spot they had left, though for Lunaria, mere moments had passed. As they stood once more under the familiar sky, they knew that while their greatest adventure might be over, their story and their love would continue for all eternity. The legend of the warrior and the sensual queen had transcended not just their kingdom, but reality itself. And in the tales told across countless worlds and countless ages, theirs would always be remembered as a love that saved all of creation. Thanks for joining us on this relaxing journey. We hope you enjoyed today's sleep story. If you did, please like and subscribe to Dreamland Sleep Stories for more soothing stories. Thanks, and have a great night.